So good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's guest photographer webinar. Hi, Piotr. I know I have you waiting in the wings. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing? You great?
I'm really good. I'm really pleased to have you with us. So thank you so much for agreeing to share this great creative project with us. This was obviously you came to our attention because I know Sam approached you to be featured in the magazine with this actual image that we're seeing at the moment. But we're going to have a little bit of an insight into the project from you tonight and sort of a behind the scenes about sort of how you put these images together, right?
That's right. Yeah, I'm really. First of all, thank you for having me. That's an honor. Um, any sort of feedback from someone who does it for so long, like you, Jay. That really means a lot. So thank you very much for that. And yes, I'm going to go through my personal story because I think it's really important, and then through the image, how I do it step by step in Photoshop, and then across work, Photoshop and Lightroom. So you guys can see step by step how I do it, and hopefully you can create some of your own amazing double exposure images.
Yeah, absolutely. It was brilliant to actually chatting beforehand with Piotr that he's gonna challenge you guys to get involved with us with your own double images. So we'll talk about that in a bit depth later on. But a fantastic idea. Now, obviously, like ourselves, Piotr does want you to interact with him, guys. So you're seeing the links for him at the moment: the website, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and he's very keen for you to interact with him as we are here at the Academy. So I'll share all these links with you, and you'll get these also in the follow-up email. Now, Piotr, we have been doing a test tonight because we know that Photoshop and Lightroom can sometimes drain on the webinar system, and we have experienced a little bit of a delay in the Photoshop section. So we just wanted to make everybody aware of this, but we have a contingency plan, and if it does slow down on us, I know we've got a step-by-step plan to sort of show them how you sort of did the Photoshop section, wasn't it?
That's true, yeah. Photoshop is a really powerful program, and it can drain my computer or the webinar. But just in case we have any issues, I prepare the slideshows, so there'll be no worries, and I can go step by step still through the slideshows with you guys, so you understand what I'm doing. And there will be also a Q&A, questions and answers, later on. So any questions, any issues, let us know, and we try to fix it for you right here, right there.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, I'm not going to waste any more time, Piotr, so I'm going to give you the screen and let you know when we can see everything clearly. But obviously, guys, we do want you to interact with us, so please use that question panel. And as I said, Piotr will ask me for questions, but also we've allowed plenty of time. Piotr, the screen's coming over to you now, so it should be giving you the prompt to share your screen. I'll let you know when we can see it.
Yep.
There we go. So I can see Lightroom clearly. I can see the first image. So I think we're good to go. So guys, anything you want to ask Piotr through the question panel, please. And I'm going to go quiet, and it's all yours, mate.
Great. So one more time, thank you very much for having me, guys. What I wanted to talk to you about is first of all my own personal story and how I started with photography and how I went into surreal art, because this is how I consider myself. I'm a portrait photographer and surreal artist in the same time. And I bought my first camera in 2013. If you read a little of my story, you could see it there. And I always knew that photography is something which I didn't just want it to be a click of a shutter button and that's all. Like you can go outside, take amazing pictures, and I'm not saying that just taking a one photograph it's not good enough. But for me personally, it was just never good enough. That's why I started to experimenting with Photoshop and doing a little bit more crazy work. I would say it wasn't even surreal, it was just crazy. The first images, you just don't want to see it. Honestly, you don't want to see it. We all started somewhere, and it all starts horrible, and then you're just going better and better and better. So I did this for 5 years now, 5-6 years, and this image is from my recent series of images. It's a series called Everyone Has Their Own Tree. And there is a story behind it. But before I even go into this, I wanted to tell you about my story. When I started with photography, that was quite a difficult time for me. So I took a year off my life, and I just closed myself in a small room, and I just learned as much as possibly as I can about camera, about Photoshop, about Lightroom, about everything which I thought is going to be beneficial for me to portray my creative ideas. And when I started to photography and everything started to fall into my place, I met my girlfriend, you know, and then we moved to London and things started to go well. And my photography was getting better, and I was working for creative clients as well, and I was really happy and pleased with it. And we all have our upside downs and things that sometimes not going well, sometimes going well. But all those things in our lives are very, very important because they always teach us a lesson. And for me personally, whenever I take a picture, especially surreal stuff, which you can see on the screen now, for me it is not just a picture or an artwork, but it's also a visual representation of someone's story. Sometimes I just go out and shoot in the park, and I overlay pictures on top of each other, and they just, you know, look great. But most of the times there is a story behind the image. So what I wanted to tell you now is how this image came into reality, and how it all started. So this is the whole series I did so far. There's 15 images. I'm not sure if you can see what I'm doing on the screen. Can we get an update on that, Jay?
Yeah, I'm seeing the your Lightroom layout and about well, I'm seeing a cross section of about 8 images at the moment. Are you into any of them individually?
Yeah, 15 images individually. Can you see that I'm scrolling through them now? Is that okay?
It's growing. It is scrolling a little bit slowly. Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to go back to this image, and let me tell you that this technique I'm using at the moment, this is called a double exposure or multiple exposure as they say, which is literally overlaying pictures on top of each other. Okay, it is so simple as that. So back in the day when photography was all film, there was no digital, you would expose film multiple times, the same film multiple times, and you would get a creative effect. Probably not like this, but it's the same principle. Now, this image you can see over here, it was done 50% in camera, and another 50% was adjusted in Photoshop and in Lightroom. So it is a quite complex image, I think. I would say there's around 5 layers on top of each other, with a little bit of masking and color work, and there's actually black and white image, then added color on top of that. As you can see just over here, the red light leak I added later on in Photoshop, which I'm going to tell you how to do that later on anyway. So, once again, double exposure or multiple exposure is just layering pictures on top of each other, and you can do this entirely in Photoshop. But I wanted to tell you, if you own a Canon 70D or Canon 5D Mark III or a few Nikon cameras, they can do that as well, where you literally take one exposure, then you take another exposure in camera, and camera is going to blend those two together, which is really, really important. And for me, my double exposure photographs, they became much better when I was doing this in camera, because you can see more what you're doing. The whole beauty of it is that you need to understand the composition, you need to have an idea, and you need to know more or less which pictures you want to put on top of each other, so you get creative image like this. But I know it all sounds like there's a lot to go through, so I'm just going to simplify that and show you how this image came live. So this is the basic image. I'm not sure if you can see, that's just a raw image from camera. There's no editing done to it. Okay, can you see this raw image here?
I think we do have a slight delay still, Piotr. We're seeing the finished image at the moment. But when you were going through the different stages, then it was pretty quick. Yeah, we've got the, is it the, we're looking at lights, the light leak images at the moment. Is that the one you're showing?
Now I'm showing the bearded gentleman.
Okay, we're not there yet, I'm afraid. So it looks like we do have this slight delay problem again.
That's okay.
So I'll let you know.
So I'm just going to switch to screenshots.
So I'm seeing, yeah, if that's where you're at now, I can see.
Yeah, so you can see the bearded guy with a light shining through his beard. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Lovely. So guys, you see, this is the basic image. This is the base image. So when you're taking a double exposure photograph, you want to make sure that well, first of all, you need to go out and shoot and try what works best for you. In camera, you're gonna have a few settings. Let me show you maybe very quickly. This is my 5D Mark III. I'm not sure if you see that. Is there a delay?
We still have a slight delay, yeah.
Okay, I'm just gonna wait a little bit. UJ, tell me. So whenever you see back on my camera, that's the picture I'm showing at the moment. So the on the control panel in the 5D Mark III, you can just select the multiple exposure setting. If you don't have it, if you don't have 5D Mark III, or you have a different brand camera, high-end camera, you know, it doesn't need to be 5D Mark III. It doesn't need to be this camera. It's just easier to work in camera. You have that mode, but it's 100% doable in Photoshop. So can you see that now?
Yeah, we're there now, mate. Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. So that is the back of my camera. You can see my finger is pointing at that setting. You just go to multiple exposure, and then you just gonna have the another menu. You need to go through the settings, just enable it because originally it's disabled, and you don't really need to worry about it too much. The camera is going to save all the exposures automatically, and then you can just play around with the settings, you know, which mode do you want to go to. I'm not going to go into details because we have only an hour over here, but honestly, I encourage you guys, go out and shoot. That's the best thing you can do, not just for the multiple exposure ideas, but for everything else. Every photographer I spoke to always tell me the same thing, especially when I started: go out and shoot. That's the best thing you can do for yourself. So I'm just gonna go back and to the control panel on my Lightroom, and I'm just going to show you all the images I want to talk about. So now you should see the first 6 images with my camera and individual layers I used for this surreal image at the end.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing, but
Perfect. So as you see, number 2 is an image of my friend, and the way I work, and I've noticed that, you know, multiple exposure technique is not very new. I'm sure you've seen it online. Other people were doing it. I think the secret and the beauty of it is just to finding your own way of doing it. So usually, what you want to do, you want to shoot your if you're doing portraits, you want to shoot the silhouette only, and you want to have just white background, preferably just plain white background all around your subject. So then when you overlay pictures on top of each other, the camera or Photoshop, which I'm gonna tell you about Photoshop in a minute, is going to overlay the picture on top of your base picture, and it's going to hide everything around your subject, and it's just going to reveal it on your subject, if it makes sense. So everything which was dark on the bottom layer is going to reveal what's dark on the top layer. I know it sounds complicated. I kind of had to put it in my head as well, because I did it for so long, I don't even think about it. But this is the basic. Now, when you see number 3 is 4 images already put on top of each other. So if I zoom in just a little bit, so you can see it just a little bit bigger, you can see the texture of the tree on my friend's face, and then you can see number 5 is a picture of just leaves with the white sky, and later on in Photoshop I overlaid that on top of on top of my friend's shoulder, because I didn't want that shoulder to show up. It was just a little bit too distracting. And there's a story behind it, which I'm going to tell you about later on as well, why I actually removed the shoulder from the shot. Then later on, the small dots over here, you can see that these are birds, and I add them later on in Photoshop. And then as the end image, I put the light leak, which is this orange haze right where his shoulder should be, and this is the very first image over here. That's the light leak. I'm not sure if that's the exact one. I tried to recreate the photo yesterday in Photoshop, and that's the one which spoke to me the most, because all the images here I shot by me. I didn't use any stock images for this work. So can you see the slideshows in Photoshop now?
We're not in Photoshop as yet, I'm afraid. It's still in Lightroom.
That's fine. That's fine. So I didn't go to Photoshop. I just opened up a slideshow from Photoshop in Lightroom. Okay. So whenever you see it, just let me know, Jay.
Okay. I still think we're experiencing about a 10-second delay, to be honest with you, Piotr.
That's fine. So so let me, in the meantime, while we're waiting for that to show up, let me tell you the story behind this image. So my friend, he's got a disease which causes him very severe pain, and it's basically pain in his, it's like a constant migraine. So he takes like very strong painkillers and stuff like that, but nothing really helps, and they say there's no cure for that. So it's quite difficult topic. I'm not going to go into details, but that was very for me, that was really inspiring, because he said that it really feels like it hurts in his, the pain spreads from his head, and that's the main source of the pain, and then it just spreads all around his body, and it really makes him feel like he's falling apart, but he has to live with it every single day. That's why the image is called "I Have to Live with It." And I think for an artist, and for doesn't matter if you're a photographer or painter or whatever, and if you see other people reacting to your artwork, and if you see their face, you can see that you created some kind of, you caused some kind of emotion, either bad or good, but they are interested, and you can see that what you did made an impact, some kind of impact on them. That's for me is the best prize. That's for me is the best thing that can ever happen to the photographer or an artist in general. So when I showed the final image to my friend, I could see, I always look for, I never ask questions. I just look for that moment when the face, the moment of the face expressions. So I could see that it really moved him. It really touched him. That was kind of that was his story, and he really felt it. And for me, that connection was just priceless. You can exhibit your images in the galleries, around the world, and you can be super famous. But if the person you wanted to make an impact on, if that person doesn't react to it, or they just, there's no feedback whatsoever, I think that's just a little bit, you basically know you did something wrong. So I was really pleased when my friend reacted to it in the way I was. I really hope that he will. So I hope that by now you can see the basic image. And Jay, how about that?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, perfect. So you can see, I'm not sure how are you guys familiar with the Photoshop and how much do you know about it, but we don't have time to go in depth. I'm already talking for 20 minutes, but I'm going to tell you and explain basics of that image. So in Photoshop, you work with layers. That's how Photoshop works. And when you do a multiple exposure photographs in camera, that's exactly the same thing. It's working with layers, just working with raw images here and there on the shoot when you're actually shooting, not later on in post-process. So in Photoshop, you can see on the right-hand side panel, I've got my layers open, and you can see I disabled all the layers, and you have just the background on. Now I'm going to move to the second slide, which is a picture of a tree I shot later on that day. And by the way, there is a pro tip for you guys. If you're trying to do this, try to make sure that you're shooting your subject and your textures you're going to be using later on in Photoshop at the same day, and preferably with similar lighting situation. So they're not too far off from each other, and they're going to look like they're meant to be there, even if it's totally surreal, crazy stuff. This is, I think, when most people, they just taking pictures Monday, and then Sunday they're going to, you know, 5 days later they're going to go out and, oh, today I'm going to shoot some textures. No, try to do it at the same day. Try to do it fairly, you know, maybe take your model to the location you think you'd be using textures from. Like trees are very good for that in terms of textures. For this project I used mainly trees because I wanted to be consistent, but you don't need to use trees. You could use CT if you have a lot of buildings in town, like tall buildings. That's what I mean. If you on the top of the hill and you can see a road going down the hill and you have a line of buildings, you can create beautiful leading lines from those buildings. And that's going to be an interesting texture as well. You can use that. If you're into a long exposure, for example, you can overlay a picture of a long exposure picture of a motorway, for example, and you can put that on top of your model. So there's a lot of ways of doing it. I picked trees because of my personal story and how I relate to it. But you need to go and find your own way. This is why. You know, Jay said that I'm going to challenge you and ask you to go out and shoot and try to find your own way and try to find your own textures, your own layers, your own style of double exposure and multiple exposure photography. And if you want to go to, you know, Photographer Academy page, Facebook page, or my Facebook page, and just comment, send me a message if you have any questions, or send a message to the Photographer Academy, and the guys over there will also always answer your question with pleasure. So as I am. But I hope by now you can see the second layer.
Yeah, we are.
And
yeah.
Perfect. So you can see on my friend's eyes, I masked this area away. Okay, and in terms of masking in Photoshop, there is a lot of tutorials at Photographer Academy, so you can go and have a look at that. But you can see this white box right next to the second layer, which is right over here. You're probably seeing a slight delay, but I'm just going with my cursor over it now. So I just literally masked the area I didn't want. I didn't want any texture over my friend's eyes, because I really wanted to have his eyes. They tell a story, so I didn't want them to be invisible by just covering it with texture like you can see everywhere else. Now then, oh, and by the way, when you overlay texture on top of someone, any picture on top of a picture, you need to change your blending mode to screen, right? So you open up your base image, then you open up a second image, and then you move that image on top of the first image, and you change the second image blending mode to screen. Okay, now blending modes are just over here. When under the layer panel, you have blending modes, and then you can use any blending mode, to be honest. But for me, the screen works the best because it has a really soft finish, and the image looks dull. It looks like you know, there's no contrast. But that's really good, because that means that you work with wide dynamic range, and you get a lot of texture out of that later on in Lightroom when you be working with it, or in Photoshop, whichever you decide. I work with Lightroom at the beginning, then I move to Photoshop, and then I'm going back to Lightroom to do final adjustments. But that also depends on the image I'm working on. So, and now I'm going to move to the next slide, which is just a next layer on top of those two already added. And this is going to remove my friend's shoulder from the image. And I hope you can see it by now.
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
Perfect. So you see how this the shoulder disappeared, and that happened because I overlaid just bright sky over this area of my friend, just the shoulder, and I obviously masked the area around the shoulder, so I don't see the rest of the photo. I can see only the area. Right. That sounds a little bit complicated, guys. I just realized that. However, let me simplify that. So you got a third image on top of those two already. You mask the area you don't want to be visible. In this case, it's the area all around the shoulder. And strangely enough, when you change that blending mode to screen, it is going to further remove the your model's shoulder, and it's just going to reveal just empty space. And that's just exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to get that empty space because my friend said that he feels like he's falling apart. So I wanted to make sure that his silhouette is not completed, because otherwise the story just wouldn't make any sense. All right. Now let's move on to the next slide, which is literally just desaturating the whole image. And I'm just going to move to the next. It's just putting another layer on top of that, which is a black and white layer. There's nothing, no editing done on that layer. Now I'm going to move to the next slide, which is adding birds to the photograph. Now those birds I shot myself. I just removed them from the background, copy paste, and I put them in the position I want them. That's really simple to do, and I'm sure you know, when you go to Photographer Academy and you find masking tutorials, this is exactly what you're going to be using to isolate a subject from your background. These are basics of Photoshop as well. It's very easy, and I'm sure we're going to have some time later on to answer your questions, and maybe we're going to have some time to actually go through this as well. Now, the next image is the light leak I used, and I shot that light leak myself. It's just literally blurred sunset, properly exposed. Then I just run it through a Lightroom, did major just a contrast over it, and then I put it to the Photoshop. I put it on top of my image, and I changed this blending mode to screen again. So it's super easy once you know what to do and you have your workflow. Once you do that, you just position it in the way you want, and you can see right next to the second layer on my layers panel, you can see that I added the mask as well, which is just removing the edges of the photo because I was turning it around to make sure that it looks the way I want, and the color is in the position I wanted, because I didn't want the color to be all over my friend's face. I really wanted the color to be just where I removed his shoulder. Now, the reason being is that I thought about this light leak as a symbol. It's a color, so I thought that it's going to be great to use this as a symbol of pain. So later on, when you see the finished image, it's very vibrant, very red, very saturated, and this is what pain is. You know, when you feel pain, you cannot think about anything else. It's just pain. So this is why I wanted this distraction from just the silhouette, and I wanted to add a little bit more to this image because of the story which it has behind it. So that is the last layer, and I hope you can see the full image by now, how I actually put it together.
I think I don't think there's only a small delay. I think there is a delay, guys. I do apologise for the delay tonight. I've just had an email from GoToMeeting saying they are experiencing a few problems. So unfortunately, it is affecting us, but we are going to work through it, and hopefully they might fix it. Yeah, I think we're at the final layer. I think we've got that.
Yeah. Which is the layer you're supposed to see now is just the final image, which is very dual and just a slight orange on my friend's shoulder.
Yeah, that's the one we're seeing. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, so there is a delay. I do apologize as well, but we work with it. There's no problem. because to be honest, I want you to go and shoot yourself, you know, shoot images yourself, don't shoot yourself. You know, that's not a good idea. But yeah, you need to go out and find your own textures, find your own stories, find your own inspiration. And the best advice I can give you is that if you have an idea in your head, and then you feel it's great, you feel like, oh, I really want to do this. And then the second question I used to ask myself is like, how the hell am I going to do this? And then I'm thinking a little bit more about the second question, and I'm thinking about the second question too much, and then I'm ending up doing nothing, you know, and that is a really bad mindset. You know, the best way is to stay with the first question, or rather an idea. Just, this is an idea, I have it in my head, and I'm going to execute it no matter what. If the first image turns out not the best, well, that's fine. You can scrap it, start over, and keep working on it until you get where you want to be. But never say that something is too difficult. Never say that you can't do this. Always stay positive. Always push and go one step further, because this is what successful people do. Always push. Always go one step further. So what I'm gonna do is just go to the finished. I'm in Lightroom now, and I'm just going to go to the finished image to show you how it turned out. So you get an idea. I'm going to talk a little bit through it again. Hope you can see that image now.
We're still, it just looks like it's moving over from Photoshop to Lightroom a second. Again, guys, I do apologize. Obviously, we have worked through it, and obviously we are experiencing some technical issues, so it's a bigger delay than we're normal. We're in Lightroom at the moment, but we're still looking at. We're not seeing the final image just yet, Piotr. We've got the 15 images at the moment, just the back of the camera we can see at the moment. I think you've just zoomed out.
Right. So once it's on, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about it. The reason being is that once you understand the story behind the image, and it kind of all comes together, you know, and you can create great images. You know, the very first double exposure I did, it got a bit of exposure on 500 pics. They asked me to do a tutorial. I did that, and people responded. You know, with they were quite interested. You know, how did you do this? And then they started to copy me, you know, and I saw a copy of my work on some various website and Facebook pages, you know, Instagram pages, and for some of them I reacted, some of them I didn't. You know, obviously there was no mention of my work. I just came across the copy of my image, and it was just exact copy, just with a different person, and there was no credit, nothing like that. And obviously when you see that, you go like, you know, so much hard work, and then someone just steals your work. It's very disappointing. But then I sat down and I thought about it a little bit longer, and I said, you know what, it's not a big issue, because this is nowhere near of how I create images. And yes, it looks like it's double exposure, and it's the technique they've been using, definitely, but it doesn't look like me, and it will never be, because they will never be me, you know. So if I'm inspired by some photographer, you know, or artist, and I would like to recreate that work, you can follow step-by-step guide, but you never be where that person is, because you're not those people. You're not your you know, people you follow. So you need to find your own way, and that's why I talk so much about story, and how to find your own inspiration, and how to, you know, stay motivated and inspired, because this is what makes you unique. This is what makes you different. This is what makes you stand out. And this is the best lesson I've learned, you know, through my photography career, that you gotta stay true with yourself, and you have to push further, you know, even if you feel like there's something missing and you're not quite there and you need a bit of inspiration, you know, never give up, and always push further. But I hope by now you can see the final image, and how it turned out.
Yeah, we're seeing it nice and clear, mate.
Perfect. So you see how I, on the very bottom, where the birds are, and when there's this empty space, I created this very, very vibrant red color. And it's funny because when you see the dull image, you can't really see it as red, you see it as orange. But then when you go in Lightroom and you take orange and you change the orange to red, then obviously the orange is going to change to red, right? Makes sense. Then you adjust a little bit of a contrast and clarity, sharpness, and you're done. You know, it's that simple. You can work a little bit more with colors and curves. You know, if you go in depth with editing, and if your skills in Lightroom are good, you can work with curves. You can work with saturation and different colors. You know, but for this image, it didn't really need to do much because it was just put together in Photoshop. I went back to Lightroom. I wanted to make it a little bit more saturated, so the texture will really pop, especially when you print it. It looks really good, and I wanted to make it sharp. I wanted to have this orange turn into red, which is really easy to do in Lightroom. It's literally just one slide. You just press a couple of buttons really, and that's it, and you're ready with the final image. The thing is that I always crop my images to squares for some reason. Not for some reason, it just works better because you're really focusing on that middle part of the image. If it would be a 16:9 ratio or 6:4 ratio, then it would be just too distracting. There would be just too white on both sides of the image, and it would be just too much of a content, and you would just get distracted, I think. So for me, square just works better. So all those double exposure photographs, they are square images. Right, so we are in 40 minutes in the webinar. Should we do questions now? What do you think, Jay?
Sorry, mate, I had myself muted there. Well, we've had a few questions coming through. A few of them have been about sort of concept ideas, but a couple of the questions that have come up at the moment, I mean, obviously we've been talking about layers. The first question that came up about the layers is, are you reducing the transparency of the layers at all?
Right, that's a very good question. I do if I need to. If let's say you're shooting very bright sky, and on your foreground you have leaves, and the leaves are going to turn black, virtually black, because you're trying to expose for the sky, right? So I would change the saturation, I mean the opacity, only when I think that the image is a little bit too strong. But you see that also that just depends on what kind of image you're working with, what is your idea, what stock images you have available. So it's really hard to say. I don't do it very often. I do it where I really need, where I think I need it.
Great. And with regards, obviously, I mean, we touched on this project and obviously the personal side of it, and obviously, you know, you touched on why you chose trees, and obviously, and the individuals here. So, is this what other? This is what you. I don't know if I'm wording this correctly because it's quite a long question. So.
Yeah.
In this process, I guess what I'm asking, was the trees the first thing you came up with, or were there other concepts that you considered first before you went down this sort of tree and roots and earth elements? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes totally sense. I understand the question, and it's a really good question as well, because like, how do you know what works, what doesn't? You know, how do you come up with, oh, the trees are great, you know? And it's not like I woke up one day and I was like, today I'm going to go shoot trees, and yeah, I'm gonna overlay them on top of my model and see if it works. Sometimes you have those aha moments, but the aha moments, I think they happen when you really practice, you know, when you really go out and shoot, when you, you know, at the beginning it's just for fun. And then when you see it actually is going somewhere, you know, my very first double exposures I did, they were terrible, as I said before, you know, and I'm really sorry I'm not going to share it with you. Maybe if you really ask, but don't really want to. So it's once I saw and I read a little bit more about double exposure, and I saw some amazing images done, that was inspiring for me, and I just started to research, you know, okay, so what works, what doesn't, and you can read a lot about it, you can see a lot of tutorials, you know, you can see other people's work. Yeah, that's great, but you're never going to actually learn it if you go and do it yourself. So I chose trees because they spoke what I'm about, and not just the connection, you know, I have. I come back to, you know, my own childhood and memories with me and my grandfather. We went to the forest. We used to go to the forest, you know, every summer, and he always told me that, you know, green color calms you down, and it's always good to come over here, you know, and sometimes just to disconnect yourself from everything, you know. And when I was living in London, it was so busy, and it was people were so different as well, because of, you know, how busy London is, and how we chase the money all the time, and how we, you know, think about our lives in general, that we don't care about anyone else. It's just me, my career, and where I want to go, and you do it no matter what. And I didn't like that. I lived there for 2 years. It was a great experience, and you know, I'm not saying don't go there. I think it's a great city, but for me personally, it wasn't. It wouldn't be a place I'd like to stay for longer than necessary. So when I moved to Wales, I realized I have a little bit more time of actually exploring and doing what I really want to do. And then my first double exposures were just stock images. You know, I took a photo of my friend, then I found stock images on Google of New York, and then I put it on top of my friend's face. I changed the blending mode to screen. I masked the areas I didn't want, put a little bit of color on top, you know. And I know it sounds simplified now. It's not so simple, but this is basically what it is, and it worked for me. And I felt like, wow, that looks really good. And it took me, I'd say, a year or 10 months of exploring and trying to find the right things, and mostly doing it in Photoshop. And then when I moved to Wales, I had a little bit more time of actually exploring, going around and trying to find the right textures for double exposure projects. And then I started to, I decided, I knew that I have a double exposure mode in camera, but I just, I wasn't too confident in using it. So I would shoot the person separately, and then I would, you know, go into Photoshop, try to find the right layer and work within it. But then I just moved entirely to camera. And when I started to do it in camera, it took me a little bit longer to find the right layer, because I didn't have, you know, I couldn't just click the fingers and just be in Australia and be in the, or just be somewhere in, you know, in the middle of nowhere in the desert and trying to find those amazing textures you can find in New York, for example, on San Francisco, you know, all those cool pictures you see on Google, you know, and cool places you see on Google. I couldn't do that. So I was kind of, it felt like I am a little bit limited, but in the same time, it was the best exercise you could never do, you can do as a creative, you know, photographer or artist or whatever, where you just go out and you shoot and you see what works, what doesn't. And like this picture I just put up for you now, and I hope you can see, that's the lady with a lot of branches kind of wrapping around her neck, and a light leak on top of her head. You can see that?
Yeah, we're seeing that one clearly, mate. Yeah.
Right, so you see that was entirely made in camera. There was no masking done on this. I just added the light leak on top, and I changed the color curve. So I went a little bit more yellow into whites and more blue into shadows. And obviously I adjusted the contrast, sharpness, you know, all the basics you would do with the photo, but that's entirely made in camera, you know. And I would love to show you, you know, the basic image, but I'm afraid that it's going to take a little bit long to load and for me to find it. So maybe in the future we're going to make some tutorials on that if you guys are interested, and we can create a series of videos where, you know, I'm going through those images with no lagging whatsoever, and you can really immerse yourself into this idea. But coming back to the main question, you know, you don't know what works, what doesn't. You don't always know if this tree is going to be good or that tree is going to be good. You've got to go, shoot, put it together, and see. And after a while, you start to realize, because it's an exercise. When you exercise your muscles, they get bigger, right? So and then you get stronger. So it's the same with seeing things. When I go out and I shoot now, I can see that this tree will work because it has certain texture, which I knew is going to give me a very good effect because it happened in the past. So it's kind of like a repetitive pattern over here, where you go and you see that works, and the beauty of it is that the more you go out, the more you shoot, and the more you practice, the better your images get, and the more exciting it is, because you keep coming up with new and new concepts. And that is the latest image I did, and I feel really proud of it, you know. And it took me maybe 2 hours to put together, where I met this lady. It's a complete stranger. I don't really know her. That's why the image is called "When I Met You for the First Time." So I took a picture of her against. She was kind enough to actually let me take a picture, so thank you very much. I took a picture of her against the white sky. Obviously, I exposed for her face, so the sky is going to be overexposed, and that's what you want. You want sky to be white, so you create a studio effect. And then the same day, literally 10 minutes later, I went into the local park, and it took me 2 hours to find this image of the tree, which I overlaid on top of each other in camera. And it took me maybe 2.5 or 3 hours together, the image, then post-process and adding the layer of the light leak on top. It wasn't so complicated because I knew what I'm doing, but just because I do double exposure for like 1.5 years now. And whenever I can, I go and explore, and I go and try to find new layers, new creative places, new trees, new whatever I find interesting, and I know it's going to work with the project. So I'm sorry there's no easy answer to this. You know, if it would be easy, everybody would be doing it, and it's never that simple. You know, you really need to go and you really need to practice. I hope that answers your question. Sorry, mate.
No, it does, and I think that's key. And actually, it's come up a few times in the questions. You know, I think you've really emphasised that this was something that interested you, but you went and you developed it, you perfected it, and obviously you've put your own stamp on it. And it doesn't happen overnight. You were very honest, which is nice about, you know, you said that you weren't happy with your first results, but what I
Oh yeah.
you know, I've been there and I've done that with certain things. I'm nowhere near as talented as this. You know, I'm a very basic Photoshop user, but you know, when I want to learn something, I learn it, and I think that's key, and that's what I like about it. And I'll keep, if it's something that means a lot to me, then in photography, then I will stick with it as best I can to, you know, to get the results and experiment. So I think experiment is key, and I think there are lots of different. I love your interpretation. You've put this this image. The more I look at it, the more, you know, I think it's almost. We all see them differently. I'm seeing like the skeleton in the face and almost the skull, which is great. You know, where, well, yeah, and, you know, in the nose where the mouth is, where it's almost clear through. You've jumped out from me now, but I see more in it the more I look at it, and it means more to me the more I look at it, and that's great.
Yeah. Well, I'm really great that you're saying it. You know, that's why I changed the picture now, because I wanted to tell you a little bit about a different story now, which is. I'm not sure if you can see the image of the girl with the flowers over her head.
Yes, we can. Yeah, we're seeing it out of 6 at the moment. It hasn't gone full screen just yet.
Yeah, but I'm sure it's going to happen in a second. So
yeah, we've got it. There we go.
Yeah, so you see, what Jay was saying is that you've got, you know, each element of that photograph, you can interpret it in your own way. You know, and for me, there is a deeper story to that image. I'm not going to the image of the girl and the tree, this dark and surreal one, but it's a different feel. Now with this one, that's a different feel again, right? When you have flowers and you have a little bit softer edges over here, and the silhouette is softer as well. And the story behind this image is that I met, this is actually one of my colleagues from work. She is very into exploring, and she loves traveling, and she keeps saying that she loves to be in touch with nature. And when the first time we met after work, we went into the local park, and she took her shoes off immediately and started walking on grass instead of the footpath. And I was like, what are you doing? And she explained to me that this is just the way she is. She loves to be in touch with nature. She loves to feel, the grass between her toes, and she loves, everything what makes her feel that she is surrounded by nature. So she loves to go to the forest, parks, and all this stuff. She's very, I don't know what word to use here, but you get the basic idea. But that's why I knew that her photograph cannot be, some moldy tree, or it cannot be like very harsh environment, because it's just going to destroy the mood, which I felt when I was with her and was talking to her. So I was walking around with her in the park. I knew that I need a basic image, so the basic image can be, shot whenever you'd like, whatever you'd like, and that's just her in the park. You can see slightly in the background, you can see the trees and the leaves just a little bit, and that's fine. That was fine with me at the time. And then I just found those flowers, and I took a couple of exposures, of those flowers. Camera put it together, and it just worked. It felt like it's just in place of those flowers. I knew that I want some kind of break of the silhouette. So you can see on her shoulder there's an empty space, and I do recommend to find something like that to break the silhouette, which you do with just a little bit of a white part of the image of the second exposure you're adding on top of the first one. That's how you do this, and the camera is just going to show you pure white. And in Photoshop later on, I added the birds because I like birds, and they always work. And in this particular image, they just show the freedom and show how she is. And she loved that image as well. She said that I nailed it. The whole story, when she told me. Obviously, I asked her the right questions because I knew what I wanted to do with that image. But she said it really works. I tend not to say what is the idea behind the image and what is the inspiration. I tend to see how people react, and if they react in a good way, that's perfect. And if they ask me more questions, I will go through it. If not, and if it doesn't go the way I want it, well, then I need to reshoot the image, or ask more questions, or find different textures, or just tell them the story and tell them my interpretation. And then it all falls into the place. So you see, every image is a little bit slight. It has a different interpretation. You can interpret it in your own way, which I like. That's why I don't create like full-on descriptions of the image. I just give you a title, and then you can interpret it in the way you want. But you see, the texture here is different, the feel is different, the mood is different, and I hope you can feel it in a different way as well. Jay, what do you think?
Oh, agreed, totally. I mean, it's obviously we're telling stories about individuals now, and I think that's quite clear through the different images that we've seen tonight. Brilliant. I've got a few sort of techie questions for you. They're not in any particular order, but just questions about sort of the amount of images and stuff like that we've used. Do you feel that there's a maximum number of layers to use before it starts getting cluttered, or will you use as many as you need to get the final image?
That's a good question. I think the more I think I used around 8 or 10 layers in one photograph. That was the most I used ever, and I don't think there is any limitation to it. The only limitation is your own creativity and your own way of thinking. If you have an image in your head, and you really want to embrace that idea, and you have multiple elements which create one thing, then you can have 100 layers if you want. But if you put it in the right order, and if you put it in the right way, then it's just going to work. There's no questions about it. Yes, if you take pictures in camera, and if you use wrong textures on top of each other, or if you use them in the wrong order, then it can just start to look messy. and I agree with that. I know where you're coming from. Whoever is asking the question, I totally understand your worries, but I believe you can have as many layers as you want, as long as you know what you're doing, and as long as you have a consistent kind of system to it, you know. And if you have, I think 3-4 layers is as many I use usually, but honestly, there's no limitation to it. If your image is not messy, you know, that's fine.
Perfect, brilliant. So this came through a couple of times actually, so it's a good point. I think you've touched on it in the process, but people have commented, obviously, there's a very distinctive outline between the subjects, but I think that's just the way you've done it when you've talked about shooting them on a very clear white background. But have you
Yeah.
cut them out at all to make that quite a strong shape to the subject, or is that just the technique you've mentioned about shooting them on the background and we've just kept those lights and darks? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's just you see, to create a surreal image like this, it just wouldn't make any sense if you for my because I did that before, when I just, you know, took a picture of my friend, and it was just, you know, dark background or whatever background, just not pure white or sky, and I overlaid another picture on top of the first one, and it didn't stand out. You see, the reason why you have if you see, I was just flicking through my photos. If you see my photos, they usually have they have white background, and then the next picture you put on top of the first one, it kind of creates an illusion that the subject is merging with the background, and it all kind of works together. And I found that it's just the best way of putting it together in terms of double exposure. It just works well, because you want to create an image, and then you want to remove from it by adding another layer on top of it. It's just what I've noticed it works, and what helps to create something which is visually attractive. You can talk about stories all day long, but if you don't create something in the same time which is visually attractive, then nobody is gonna go for it. You know, it's just not gonna be interesting enough. So it's yeah, I think for me it just works well, you know. But you may find something so unique and something so so different to what I do, and it could also work. You know, it's still the limitation is your own imagination. That's what I always say. You know, but from my experience and from you know those this time I'm doing it, that just worked for me the best, and that's how usually double exposure work with the silhouettes.
Perfect, brilliant. So I thought this was quite a nice question. We've only got a couple left, mate. Would you always use the main subject as the main image, or have you ever used the texture layer as the main emphasis in an image?
There's no problem with using texture first and then adding someone's face on top of that. You know, you can use it that way, and you're gonna get slightly different effect, or the same depending on the layers. If you would be doing it the way I do it, you know. But for me, because I moved to the camera and I do double exposure in camera, for me it's easier to have a photo of a person first, and then adding texture, because everyone is different. Everyone has a different shape of their body, you know. So if you take a picture of a texture first, it may work with friend A or a model A, but it may not work with model B, you know. So that's why you have model first, and you have the story behind it, and then you go out and shoot and trying to find textures, because it's just easier to do it that way, not the other way around, because yeah, because textures are so different. Yeah, so as people, but I just find it easier to have an outline of person first, someone's silhouette, and then adding layers of textures later on.
Can we quickly jump back to the image of your friend with the flowers in her face? That's the one, brilliant. There we go. So the question specifically was, and I know again we haven't been able to show this properly like we hoped to in Photoshop, If we wanted to, so this is a hypothetical question, if we wanted to remove the leaves in the background, would this be done in Photoshop or would you be able to do it in Lightroom?
You can do it in Lightroom, but it would be just more difficult. I would just go, if you let's say you don't have individual layers, right? Because I think I'm not sure, but I think I do have individual layers. Once you shoot in camera, Canon or whichever camera you shoot with, it saves. Well, I know Canon does. I'm not sure about the other cameras, to be honest. Sorry, but Canon saves all the layers automatically. So if it applies all those images, it merges it together in camera as well. So you have your basic images, and then you have your finished product as well. So then if you don't like something with in the finished image, then you can go back to Photoshop, put those layers on top of each other, and then remove things you don't want. That's how I work as well. Because sometimes you can see like, oh, that's perfect. This is exactly what I was looking for, but I can't see someone's face or I can't see someone's eyes. So then you go like, that would be so good, but this one element doesn't work the way I want it. So if you have all the separate images, you can go back and change it in Photoshop, and I don't see any problem with that. It's still shooting camera. You're just removing or adding certain aspects to the photo. And in terms of this one, if you want to remove the background or if you want to have just plain backgrounds, you can do it, and that will be done in Photoshop. I think that will be just easier to do in Photoshop.
Yeah, great, brilliant. Excellent. Well, that is all of the questions, Piotr. So we're bang on time, which is absolutely fantastic.
Perfect.
Obviously we're going to set the challenge in a second, but before I do and before I forget, I know we've had a few technical issues tonight, but I think we really definitely got the message across. The feedback's been really, really good in the panel. But you did offer, and I was going to ask, so I would really like to see if we can get sort of the video tutorial about doing it together. Obviously, we've only got you down the road, which I didn't know before we started talking. I didn't realise that you were
happy days
just down from us, which is fantastic. So we'll desperately try and get that done sooner rather than later. I've already invited Piotr to come and visit us here at the studio, so we'll try and get that done soon. But yeah, because Piotr's is keen to show you the process as we are within Photoshop, and we're hoping to have done it live tonight, but unfortunately with the technical issues we've got there. But yes, and everybody's going, yes, please bring him back, get him on video, let's see him how he does it. So I think, so you've got no choice now. I'm putting you on the spot.
That's great.
Excellent. Yeah, we've got it. It's all coming through thick and fast. Yes, get him on camera. Get him on camera. So
good. Yeah, guys. If you're really interested, just let me know. If you can, Jay, put those links, again on screen, or send an email or something like this. If you're interested, hit me on my Facebook page, or send me an email to a website. Let's see the feedback. Let's see if the people are interested. If the more people we get on board, the better. So I can really focus on that, and I can deliver the value to you guys. I just need to know that you are interested.
Brilliant. And yeah, the links have gone out via the chat panel, and they'll all be getting an email from me tomorrow with all your links on there as well. But absolutely. Well, yeah, I know for a fact that I want you back, so I'm not letting you go that easily, mate, anyway. So you can put up a fight, but you'll lose. I'm really
right. Looks like it's not going to be just a coffee. We may have a bottle of wine then.
That's a deal. It's a done deal. Yeah. If that's what it is. You have to do the work first, and then we get the bottle of wine. But that's a done deal, mate. I promise. I might even treat you to a bag of chips. Let's push the boat out. So we'll get something sorted. But from me to you, anyway, thank you so much for coming on board. Like I said, when I saw the image come through from Sam for the magazine, which we'll talk about again briefly in a second, I said to Sam, let's get him on the phone. I know it took a little bit longer than we initially planned to get to this stage, but I said we've got to feature this guy. And
yeah, we're here already, so it's fine.
And really, really nice that even though I love I'd only seen the one image when I got to see the others, and now I've known the story, and now I know the project. It means so much more, and I think it's important that these people have got to do these projects, whether they're personal or they're for somebody else. It's a great way to push your photography and to push yourself as a photographer and a creative as well. Get out of your comfort zone, get out of the norm, do something different. I didn't even know before talking to you that, the Canon, we've got Canon 5D Mark IIIs here, but I didn't know we could do it in camera. Because
Uh-huh.
obviously, I'm familiar with double exposure processes, but I didn't, so as you explained to me, the beauty of being able to look at these exposures live, where, but obviously we appreciate that not everybody's going to have that facility, but the principles are there. But if you do have, like you said, that Canon, what did you say was a 70D does it as well? Is that right?
Yeah, I actually found out just today. I think that's 70D as well. Don't quote me on it. I'm
No, no, no,
100%
of course.
sure, but I think 70 as well.
Don't go
Yeah,
and
and
find the camera
I'm
just
sorry
to say
to
so.
stop you here, but I just wanted to say one thing as well. What you said over there was really, really important. That if you go out of your comfort zone and you shoot something you never did before, even if it's yeah, maybe don't do it for the client, but if you do it for yourself, it's great to not only learn about double exposure itself, but also you see how light works in general, and that's going to give you a better understanding on, later on if you're shooting normal stuff. That's gonna just make you such a better photographer because you're gonna be thinking in a different dimension, and I can promise you that.
Excellent. And somebody's just chipped up. I know we're talking about Canon at the moment, but by all accounts, the 6D does it as well. And
There we go.
we've got one of those in the cupboard, so I'm going to definitely go and have a look at that tomorrow.
Happy days.
Without a doubt. Brilliant. Well, Piotr, again, from me to you, thank you. Everybody, loads of feedback and thanks in the chat panel already.